one. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. We're coming at you live from New York. This is Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. And I'm so glad that you're here. This is your daily dose of spiritual connection. Wherever you're coming from, know that you have people that are like you, that are searching like you, that want connection and community. And we're here to give it and to share it and experience it. My name's Dayal. I'm here with Kishore Chandra and Achyuta Gopi. And how are you guys doing this morning?
Feeling sheltered.
Feeling sheltered. That's the response of the week. Go over it on Puja. It's a great week to feel sheltered.
I'm also feeling sheltered. I'm going to take it from Achyuta Gopi. Likewise.
Likewise. Kishore's feeling sheltered because Achyuta's feeling sheltered, and I'm feeling sheltered. I'm grateful for you guys. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad when both of you guys are here because it's super fun. All right.
We didn't get to call Kishore out for his birthday yesterday.
We did not get to
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Kishore. Yesterday was Kishore's birthday. How old are you, Kishore?
I am 34.
Still
34. Dang. What'd you say, Achyuta?
Still the baby of the group.
How old are you, Achyuta? Am I allowed to ask that? You're 37. And when's your birthday?
May 7th.
So you turned 37 this year. God, how old do you guys think I am?
I know how old
you know how old you are.
You both know?
Yes.
How old am I?
Aren't you just a few months older than me?
Yeah, that's true.
No, I thought you're 38, no? Oh, you're gonna turn 38.
I'm gonna turn 38 in a couple weeks. 37. I was with Arjun yesterday on the subway, and he totally forgot his year. He was like, "Yeah, I'm 73." I was like, "What year were you born?" It was like 1950. He's like, because he said he was born in the same year as Radhanath Swami, and Radhanath Swami's 71, going on 72, and Arjun was like, "No, he's 73." And I was like, "He's the same age as me." And I was like, "You were born in 1950?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Arjun, you're 71, going on 72." And it was like, "Oh my God, I've been 73 all this time, but I thought I was 73. It was only 72." And I was like, I get it. Although I'm half your age, I also forget my age at time.
I actually forgot. I had to remind myself what age I was turning. I was like, wait a minute. Am I turning 33? Am I already 33? Or am I turning 34? Like I had a moment where I was like, gets confusing.
30s are kind of strange. And then you're getting to 40s, and 40s are kind of like the forgotten decade. There's nothing about it. You're not senior yet, but you're also like not, like 30s, you're still in that, like all the 30-year-old memes and everything. Like you just left your 20s. You're kind of an adult. You're still holding on to some youth. When you get to your 40s, I feel like I'm 2 years away from 40s. It's like, what's going on in this decade?
I am going to bring that decade back, okay?
If you just bring it back to 40, we're gonna rock it.
Back. It's
Yeah.
gonna be
Wait till the millennials turn 40 and see what happens when millennials turn 40.
It is gotta be. I mean, I can't wait. I can kind of wait, but I cannot wait.
All right, we're gonna have to. What is it? Today is 2022, 2024. We both turned 40. Let's make that our year.
We're gonna rock that year.
We're gonna rock that year.
Let's not talk about it ever again. No.
Speaking of growing old and the realities of birth, death, old age, and disease, let's turn to the Bhagavad Gita.
I need guidance.
Our guidance, which we've been talking a lot about, the eternal nature of the soul. This whole chapter, this whole idea of our Arjuna asking Krishna, what's the right thing for me to do? You ever had that question, like, what's the right thing for me to do in this situation? And it's interesting because there's what's the right thing to do, and then there's what's the right thing for me to do, because sometimes what's the right thing to do can get very gray. It's not always a cookie cutter answer. Sometimes what's right for me is not what's right for you, even in the same situation, depending upon time, place, and circumstance, where we're at in our life, our stage of life, our relationship to the person, our relationship to the circumstance itself. And so much, I think, in life, especially we look for spiritual principles of like, what should I do? We kind of want to get like this textbook where we just look up our circumstances in the index and just find, okay, turn to page 378 and you will understand exactly what you should do in the situation. And what we find is that that's never given in the Gita about, should you go or stay in your marriage? Should you have kids or not? Should you take this job? Should you move to this other country? Should you turn 40 or not? Like those kind of decisions aren't given over to us. It doesn't tell us specifically what we should do because everybody has a different circumstance and a different nature and a different, even what's right for me to do now may not be right for me a year from now or 10 years from now, etc. And so what we're given is general spiritual principles to understand how to apply them in our circumstances. And the first thing that Krishna does, it says, well, if you want to know what's right for you, you have to understand how you are. And so he goes in this whole treatise of the soul. And then from that place, we get to a space of, well, okay, great to know these eternal principles, but what does that mean for me, who am about to turn 40? Like, I still feel like I'm going to turn 40. And so this idea, and Arjuna is asking, well, what does that look like in a person? What are the qualities of a spiritually realized person? How do they move through the world? And it's more than just the external of how you dress, how you wear your hair, your eye color, your skin color, your age, where you live, the occupation that you have, but it's how do you speak? How do you treat other people? How do you respond to difficult circumstances? And so yesterday we left off with this verse 55. The Supreme Person said, when a person gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when their mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then they're said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. So he's laying this principle of like, when you're no longer trying to get from the world because you're so satisfied with your inner world, then you're able to situate yourself in transcendental consciousness and start to move throughout the world with a sense of ease, a sense of grace, a sense of maturity, a sense of calm, a sense of equanimity. And that's the first part of the answer Krishna starts to give, and that's where we left off. And we're going to kick off in verse 56. Did I get it all right? Anything I missed? Anything I went off the rails with? Kishore gives me a okay sign, and Achuta's like,
No, I think it's super interesting. I feel like to get into a really, really, really subtle part of things. It's like when a man gives up all desire for sense gratification, which arises from mental concoction. And we don't normally think of that as sense gratification. When people are, because in a second, Krishna is about to talk about lust, anger, and greed, which check a man's progress in the spiritual path, the whole thing. And when we think about lust in quotes, everybody's usually really, really, really concerned with what everybody else is doing when the lights go off, which I think that we should really stop being so concerned with what people are doing when lights are off. And instead, we should really be looking at this verse in terms of like, that grasping for straws, that like desperate clawing for even existence and all of this stuff, it's like it's not actually, and the mental jugglery, and then the word jugglery that comes with it, and all the ways that we try to make you try to jerry rig your way through life, basically.
sounds like you're turning 40.
That's
The feeling of turning 40.
how it's gonna feel like when I do it. When I do it, I don't know what it's gonna be like, but it's gonna be epic. But I do feel like we kind of cast that to the side, and we don't think about that as the desire for sense gratification, especially when we're thinking about it in spiritual terms. We tend to think of the most blunt and obvious ways first, and it is so really important and kind of fascinating to look at how nuanced this idea of sense gratification is, and how subtle and insidious it can be. And Krishna is saying, he's like, look, even this idea about grasping so desperately, like, well, but I need to know exactly what it is that's right for me in every single moment and all this stuff. And I feel like Krishna's like, even if I told you everything, you'd still be confused. At a certain point, you're just gonna have to go with it. You're gonna have to surrender. At a certain point, you're going to have to surrender to the fact that you will never ever know everything. Even if you pick the right path, even if you pick the path of the best religiosity and the best economic development, whatever it is, you're never going to know everything about everything, and you're never going to know every single possible consequence. And so, earlier we were talking about how Krishna was saying you have to get out of this thick, tangled web of action and reaction, this web of karma and this web of fruitive activities and all of these things. At a certain point, you're going to have to surrender, even to the fact that I'm just never going to know everything. I'm not going to know how everything is going to turn out. And what is amazing is that Krishna is always assuring, it'll be fine. If you surrender to that, I will make it fine. It will be okay. I will make your situation better. I will personally step in and make your situation better when and if you want me to.
I love so much of that, and we'll hear from you, Kishore, also. But Krishna reminding it's going to be fine, and I think that trust, that belief of things will be fine. I think it goes right to the heart of the message of the Gita and spirituality, because actually, in order for us to trust that things are going to be okay, it forces us to redefine what we think is actually important. And so when Krishna is telling me, I will make it fine, things are going to be okay. We're like, what do you mean things are going to be this, that? Well, if you're thinking all of that is the definition of happiness, all of this, that, and the other is what you need in order to be fulfilled, then yeah, maybe things aren't going to be okay. Because those things you can't control, and I'm not promising that those things are going to work out. But what I am telling you is that those things that you think are so important, they're so intrinsic to your happiness, that are so important for you to hold and grasp onto and control and fixate on, like those things actually have nothing to do with you. Those things have to do with all of the false, temporary, arbitrary identities that you've assimilated, or we talked a little bit about yesterday or the day before about the Four Agreements, that book, about the idea of like just making these agreements with ourselves and society and the world that we don't question. Like, who questioned that is the formula for happiness? Who questioned that is what I need in order for quote unquote things to be okay? And so what Krishna's doing is elevating it to the higher level. Like, I'm not necessarily going to solve all your material problems, but I'm going to solve the material problem, which is the fact that you've been looking for love in all the wrong places, and that you have this false conception about who you are. You have a false conception about what the goal or purpose or meaning of life is. You have a false conception about what it means to be, we use this word, well situated in yourself. And so it's not, God solve all my problems. It's God help me understand what actually is a problem, what isn't.
I agree with everything that all of you have said.
Thank you, Kishore. That's his general contribution. I agree. No, I'm just
And the
joking.
verse for today is but
Can we
actually
get back to the verse, please?
actually everything that all of you have been saying is basically the verse that we're talking about today. A lot of it is in there. And I think that there's an even deeper level that will be a big cause of conversation and deliberation that is in the purport, because I really love how Achyuta was saying, like, not only do we not know, like we have to surrender and give up this control of our mental concoctions and speculations, and understand that we might never know, we might never know Krishna's plan, and we kind of just have to accept. But specifically in the purport, it goes to an even deeper level, and I'll get to it in a second, in regards to like when things don't go our way, or when there is suffering, or when there is distress, or when there is misery. Because a lot of the times when we are going through those situations of suffering, the question is always like, why me? Why is this happening to me? This is senseless, or this is not fair, or whatever, right? But this verse 256 is the beginning of the answer to how does the transcendentalist, or someone who is fixed in relationship with God, how do they speak? And when we're thinking of like, how do they speak, we're really thinking of like, how do they respond? How do they respond when things don't go their way? How do they respond to happiness or distress? You know, how do they respond to the onslaught of this world? You know, and so Krishna here says, one who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. And it's such a beautiful verse because it's again pointing us towards that. Earlier in the Gita, Krishna was speaking about this equipoise and this equanimity. It's pointing us towards that direction where I'm neither elated or disturbed when things go my way, and I, you know, all of a sudden I got the job, got the thing, got the girl, got the guy, whatever it is. And I'm also not disturbed when things don't go my way. You know, I broke up, I lost my job, I'm whatever, you know, going through some internal stuff. But we can break down that verse a lot, and I really want to hear all of your input on it. But there's this one part in the purport that I read that I was just like, ooh, and I think that you know where I'm going. And so let's see. I really like how Srila Prabhupada defines a sage, right? This Muni. So he says, one who has surpassed the stage of mental speculations, which we've been talking about, right? Like the mental concoctions, and has come to the conclusion that Lord Sri Krishna or Vasudeva is everything. He is called a Muni, a sage, fixed in mind. And then here we go. Such a fully Krishna conscious person is not at all disturbed by the onslaughts of the threefold miseries, for he accepts all miseries as the mercy of the Lord, thinking himself only worthy of more trouble due to past misdeeds. And he sees that his miseries, by the grace of the Lord, are minimized to the lowest. And then it continues, just one more thing. He says, similarly, when he is happy, he gives credit to the Lord, thinking himself unworthy of the happiness. He realizes that it is due only to the Lord's grace, that he is in such a comfortable condition and able to render better service for the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada goes on speaking about kind of like attachment and aversion, you know, like attachment to the things that keep me, you know, kind of comfortable in this happy place, aversion to the distress. But it's really interesting, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I feel like from a philosophical point of view, or from a karmic point of view, from a theoretical point of view, when I'm objectively looking at things, it's like, yeah, everything happens for a reason. And, you know, like all that suffering taught me something in retrospect. And it's like, I can see that in retrospect. But I feel like sometimes for people that are suffering or that are going through something in the moment, it's like, how do we reconcile that? Because it's very hard. I'm just speaking from personal experience, when you're suffering, to be like, this is all part of the plan. I know it. I know it's part of the plan. So I'm just going to suffer without being, you know, too attached or too averted to this, you know. It's quite difficult. So I want to hear your take on it.
Yeah, nor should we ever use that as advice when someone is suffering. Like I heard that like that is a huge no-no. Radhanath Maharaj said that that idea of like this is your karma and this is really heavy karma and you know you should never see your suffering as it, that is never to be said to the person who's actually suffering. You see, it doesn't work. They cannot hear you, and that has to be okay. um I think Doyle and I, we first like started really deeply bonding. I was doing a podcast and I was saying that there's a time for philosophy and a time for love. And sometimes when you are going through strife and struggle and all of these things, that is not the time for philosophy. Which is why I thought it was really interesting whenever you call like devotees for somebody's funeral and everybody gets there and they whip out Bhagavad Gita and they read the second chapter. And I understand the idea behind it, but also it can start to feel really mechanical. And, you know, personal story time. When I was born, I was in the hospital for several months because I was only 1.5 pounds, really small child. Skin was transparent, lucent, whatever, translucent. You could see through it. And somebody said to my parents, "Yeah, it's some heavy karma, like you just got to deal with all this karma." My parents they were not happy with that. My mom was distraught. My dad was very vocally unhappy. But it's so difficult when you are in the midst of trauma to think that there's something that warranted this happening to me for some reason or other. And when my mom read Bhagavad Gita, when she first became interested in becoming a devotee, she said she was reading Bhagavad Gita thinking, wait. So this is my fault? Like I somehow made choices in the past that now brought me to this place? And the answer is yes and no. Sometimes yes, which is why past life regressions are not always the best thing. A lot of people are like, why can't we know everything that we did in the past? I'm like, I don't think we want to know everything we did in the past. Because what if you didn't agree with the person you used to be? Sometimes it is best to leave that lifetime back where it was. And so in that case, sometimes maybe yes, maybe we've done some things, maybe those things have fully fructified into reactions that we are facing, but also no. Maybe sometimes those hardships occur and those lessons were not for you. Those lessons are for other people. And so sometimes you can think, oh my gosh, but why would God put me in that situation? All that stuff. If that lesson was for somebody else, let them handle it on their own. Like, why do I have to be involved? Yeah, that's the fine print about this material world place. We're all involved. We are all kind of complicit. We are all incriminated. We all get roped in. And Arjuna is really now like, well, how do I tap out of this situation? Like, if we're all incriminated and we're all roped in, Krishna, like, what's the point of anything? How do I tap out? How do I get out of this situation? And that's where Krishna keeps coming back in. You've got to surrender. You've got to surrender. And so in that regard, I feel like giving the credit to Krishna when things go right is not it's not abandoning oneself, and it's not false humility. It's just truthfulness. So sometimes the goal of this life is just to be truthful, really truthful at heart. And steadiness of mind doesn't mean that we don't think things hurt. It means that we see an end game either way.
Love it. There's a lot. There's a lot I want to share, but I'm going to save it for tomorrow because we are done with time. I wanted to bring up something about coping mechanisms and how in spiritual life, I don't think coping mechanisms go away, but there's almost like we find healthier, more sustainable ways to to get through suffering that's not just philosophical. It all happens for a reason, but there are instances where we're actually like, this just really sucks and we have to find a way to weather this storm till we get to the other side of it. And that doesn't spiritual practitioners are not immune to that need. We're given tools through which we can cope with suffering that doesn't implicate us in just further and deeper suffering, which is often what we do. I'm feeling a suffering, and so I'm going to do things that maybe temporarily alleviate my suffering, but are ultimately packing on a whole lot. I'm just digging further ditches for myself into a well of unfortunate circumstances. And so, but we can save all of that for tomorrow. We're at our time, and we've got Kimberly, our taker awayer, there from the West Coast. What you got for us, Kimberly?
Taking away that I'm not gonna know how everything will turn out, but regardless, it's gonna be okay because Krishna is everything and will personally step in and make our situation better. And I love what Achyuta said about how giving Krishna credit is to live truthfully as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Any closing words? Closing words, Kishore and Achyuta.
I think I'm going with, I just want to live as truthfully and authentically as possible. Apparently that's what my chart says I should do too. Astrologically, I'm supposed to be like living authentically or whatever. So I'm gonna go with that or
And go
whatever.
with it. Stars are aligned.
I'm gonna go with I think something I'm taking away, and just for all of us as we read Bhagavad Gita, is to remember that we're at the end of chapter 2, and there are 16 more chapters left. And so sometimes when we read things like this, like the transcendentalist is supposed to be like this, the yogi is supposed to be like, I have to be like this. Oh my God, I'm not on that level, you know, like there's a tendency. I remember when I first read it, I was just like, oh, this is how you're supposed to be. Okay, so I'm just going to be totally detached. You know, that's not how it works. And actually later in Bhagavad Gita, it's a whole journey. You know, it's a whole journey that Arjuna is going through and that we're going through with him that eventually is going to take us to bhakti. And bhakti is so different. It's not kind of the, because, you know, when you read something like this, it kind of can seem a little bit like clinical, like I just don't feel anything. I'm just, you know, equanimity and equipoise. I'm just like, oh, it's happy or it's good or it's sad or it's not, whatever. I'm just the same. And it's like bhakti is very different, like this process of love and surrender and devotion to the divine. It's like we're getting there. So don't just remember, I think I'm walking away also telling myself that we're at chapter 2. We're at chapter 2.
Those are beautiful takeaways. Thank you all so much. I'm dialing all the way back and almost not even to the podcast before we started. I'm holding with me the idea and just need for community and how many of us are out there looking for each other, just haven't found it yet. I'm just thinking of our friend Kim here, who's joining us from the Bronx in our live audience, who connected with us for the first time today. She's in our live audience, and we got to hear a little bit of her story before we launched the recording of this episode. And just hearing people's story that we haven't met yet. Like we're having this conversation, and there's people that want in on the conversation, that are having their own conversations. This isn't the only conversation, but there's a broader, ongoing kind of universal conversation of like, how do I connect to my deeper self? And where can I find my people? And where can I find belonging? And where can I find a place of everyone's looking? It was like George Harrison wrote in the preface, introduction to the Krishna book. Everyone's looking for Krishna. Some know it and some don't. And Prabhupada in the beginning of Nectar Devotion has this beautiful, elaborate definition of like, what is Krishna and who is Krishna, in this broad, universal understanding of how many of us are looking for the same thing. And so my just takeaway is to just open my view of the people that, especially in New York City, where you're just around a lot of people. Sometimes you wish you weren't around so many people, you know, whether it's your neighbors or stacked on top or in the subway or this train's crowded, et cetera. But it's like each one of these people is a beacon of light. And some of the lights are burning bright and some of them are a little bit dimmed. But we are lights looking to connect with each other. So I'm just so grateful for this community in Sangha, for Achyuta and Kishore for being here with us, for all of our live Zoomers, and for all of the people listening out all over the world, wherever you're from. I still have no idea how many people are listening. Radha Swami was asking me the other day how many people listen to the podcast. I was like, I have no idea. I think we've checked before. Do we know, Kishore, how many people are listening regularly?
Yes, I checked yesterday and
Ooh.
I have it pulled up now.
Kimberly's saying I said millions the other day. Yeah, it's somewhere
Millions.
around there, somewhere between a dozen and a million.
No, we have like an average of like 1,400 listeners per month.
1,400 listeners per month.
Yeah.
That's what we got, guys. So all 1,400 of you every month, we love you. We're grateful for you. We're glad you're here. Thank you guys so much. Please be well. Please take care. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday to round out the week. And be well. Know that you're loved. Know that you have community and you're connected. Share this with a friend and write to us. We started our email, spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. Write to us. Let us know you're there. Let us know what you're taking away and what your experience is. Tell us your story. Ask us questions. If you got questions, spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. We want to hear from you. Take care, everybody. We love you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.